If you didn't see my last video, I made a video about the history of a TV show called Colonel Bleep, the 1957 first color animated television cartoon. I interviewed the son of the creator. I interviewed an animation historian named Jerry Beck. It was a fun project, but I left out something important about it because I wasn't quite ready to talk about it yet because we didn't exactly know the results yet. So I want to give you the full story on what happened, how I discovered Bleep, and what the whole other thing is. So I was first introduced to Bleep through those weird public domain DVDs that I feel like most of us Gen Zers had as a kid, and I feel like a lot of millennials had these too, where it was just a bunch of public domain animation on a few DVDs that was pressed on the flimsiest plastic imaginable. And I watched that religiously. And there are a few episodes of Bleep on there. And I think I maybe watched one, and then I got bored, and then I turned it off, and then I never thought about Bleep again. Later, much later, like in the last 2 years maybe, I rediscovered Bleep, and I actually took some interest in it, and I actually tried to find some of it, and that didn't last too long. So back of the mind it went. And then in July of this year, my partner wanted to go to a Newgrounds Death Rugby concert, and I went with them. And next door there was this bookstore that was inside an old ginormous opera house, and I went inside. I went through the VHS section, and they actually had these two tapes, the only two tapes that Streamline Pictures released of Bleep. I was overjoyed because I had never actually seen these in person. I went to the concert with these tapes in a plastic bag, and the entire concert is going, and here I am sitting in the back with two Colonel Bleep tapes. When I got home, I watched those, and I actually had tons of fun with watching that, and I thought it would be a great idea to do some more research on Bleep and maybe cover it on this channel. And that's what I did. So when going to the cartoon research article on Colonel Bleep, I've discovered a comment from Scott Schley under it, talking about the show and saying that he is the son of Jack. So I did some research on Scott and discovered that he was a sculptor, and still is, and found his number, and we got in touch. But what I didn't mention is, while we were talking about Bleep, is that while he doesn't have most of his father's work because they just didn't keep it, or a lot of it was thrown away, what they did still have was one singular film reel of Colonel Bleep episodes.
It's a 16 millimeter color, I believe. It might be black and white. Maybe it's black and white. I don't even know. Very vinegary, and it's kind of gooey and pasty, but it's kind of sticky, and the real vinegar smell, and the acetate or whatever. It's obviously all deteriorated. I think it was black and white though. It was sent to a friend of my dad's. Just a childhood friend who also had a family or whatever, and his kids are growing up. I think my dad sent it to them for like a Christmas present or something back in the 50s, and then back in the 1970s or 80s, it was sent back to me by one of those kids, just saying, we found this in the attic or whatever. Might be the lost episodes of Bleep. Who knows? And I just laughed it off at the time, but I kept it.
So Scott was kind enough to mail this to me, along with a poster from Mighty Mr. Titan, which was another production from Soundak. The poster that he mailed me was in 15 or 20 pieces printed on tabloid paper. They had photo scanned up at a print shop. That was a fun challenge to put back together. The film reel came in a hummus bag. When I opened it up, it absolutely reeked of vinegar and rot. Because this happens with acetate film. If you leave it in a humid and warm environment, or even if it just ages, it goes through a process called vinegar syndrome, where it begins to decay, and it emits a wonderfully rancid vinegar smell that's much worse than if you huff white vinegar. It's unique, and it makes your throat sting. So that was fun, and looking at it just visually, and Scott had already told me this, that it was in very, very poor shape. But it could be resuscitated a little bit, and I had some hope, but I needed money because I'm a college student and make very little money, so I did not have the funds to buy the chemicals needed, as well as scan it or get a new canister for it, whatever. So I made a few tweets, I made a little fundraiser, and thankfully, out of the blue, I was contacted by a person named Not an Animation Historian, who ironically does animation history stuff. And he has a previous history with Bleep and wanted to fund the entire operation of getting this thing cleaned up and scanned, which was very exciting, and I am eternally grateful for that. So, first things first was I got a new canister for it. And when I ordered the canister, they sent me the wrong canister. So I got this little tiny canister instead that didn't fit. So I had to get a new canister, and then the new canister actually did fit it. So that was step one, no more hummus bag. Step two was getting the chemical needed. And the chemical I needed to use to get it to loosen back up, because it was all stuck in one little puck of film, was a chemical called Vitafilm. And Vitafilm has been used for decades to do this kind of thing. So I've ordered that, and I think it was about $70 just for a pint of the stuff. And it came home. And what you're supposed to do is you put the Vitafilm in the canister with the film, and you basically soak the entire reel and the chemical inside a closed canister and put it in a cool, ventilated area. The issue is that I live in a suburban home. I have no cool, ventilated areas, so the film unfortunately had to be stuck out in the garage because of the smell. Not only does the vinegar smell, but also the Vitafilm has its own smell, so it was just so bad that like even if it kept it inside, the entire family would get high. So it actually had to sit outside in the garage. I put a fan on it. I monitored its temperature. It was fine. It stayed around room temperature. It was just very funny to look at. So it stayed like that overnight. And I checked back on it, and it had loosened up a little bit, but not a ton, but there was some hope. So the next step was to dry it. So yeah, I just dump out all of the Vitafilm into a jar, which is now sitting in my closet, yellow and gross. And then it sits alone in a canister, slowly drying for 3 months. And that's where it went. And then it was radio silent for a bit. And then finally, I got to open the thing back up and see that it was actually almost fully loosened up, and the film was fairly pliable to get put through a scanner. This was very exciting, and so I gave a heads up to a friend of mine at Kaneko Video, who was happy to get the thing scanned. So I sent it over to him, and we waited a bit, and then he finally got it, and we could inspect it, and the results were not good. Going through the reel, there was an introduction that had survived, but it was extremely brittle. Everything else after that, it was just goop. It was just melted yellow gunk. All the emulsion had become nothing. There was no picture. All that was left was film base. There was a bit of the introduction, like with the countdown sequence, you could see it just barely in what was left, but it was so slim, there was no reason to scan it. The only bit that we really did scan from that part was the end sequence, which was a bit eerie. Yeah, the only other part I got scanned was the introduction with Bleep. But the introduction was still pretty cool. It actually was a little bit animated, and it had an interesting story to it. As said, these cartoons were dedicated to Debbie and Kurt, and I didn't understand who those people were, so I called Scott back up to ask about it, and he gave me some context.
Kurt, who was my age, I don't know if he's still around. I don't know him that well. He was the son, and Debbie was the daughter of George Twink, who was my dad's best buddy in like high school up in Buffalo, New York. They went to Tech High School together, and Twink was a really good medical illustrator. This must have been a gift that he sent to them for a Christmas present or something, who knows what. But that's what and he probably made the little customized Bleep promo at the beginning just for fun. But that's who Kurt and Debbie are, Schwenk. That's what I know. I'm pretty sure that's what the deal is.
It was definitely disappointing with the results of the film. I mean, we all expected it, but it was still sad to see that it had decayed to this rate. Unfortunately, I don't think we're just ever going to know what was on it. Probably just a few episodes of Colonel Bleep, but we don't know which ones. They could have been ones we don't have. They could have been ones we already had. God knows. I'm glad that we got to save as much as we could, even though it was about 15 seconds and half of that was later film. But though we couldn't save much of it, I mean, I was still happy to have it. I mean, this was a print that Jack Schley had, created himself as a gift for French children. I think it's a really sweet story, and I had my friend ship it back to me. Even though it's not really useful as a film, I think it's very useful as an artifact. Colonel Bleep, over half of it is still not available to anywhere. There's rumors that about 90 episodes exist with a company named Real Media, which is managed by Tom T. Moore. I've contacted Real Media. They have no interest in sharing these, even though they're a distribution company. I also emailed Tom about it, and I didn't get a response back. So who knows what they actually have, if they do have anything. They are the same company that gave the episodes that they had to Jerry Beck for the Streamline releases, so they have something, just don't know how much it is. But it was a fun experience, and I would do it again. I've learned some things. I never worked with film in person before. I mean, I have a few prints, but I never actually managed to do anything with them. Film is expensive to get into, and yeah, that's the story of exhuming the alien and seeing its corpse. So that was fun.